morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today I'll be sharing with you how our organization is conducting threat hunts without a formal threat hunt team. So, as Sunil has already covered all the introductions, so I'll just skip through it and just want to give a quick shout out to my really amazing team at ICE that have contributed to our internal threat hunt initiative, and without them, this would not have been possible. And a quick disclaimer here that any opinions expressed in this presentation are solely my own and do not represent the views of my employer. So I'll be sharing with you briefly what threat hunting is and how it's compared with detection engineering, some of the threat hunting frameworks currently available out there, and how it led to the creation of our internal threat hunt initiative known as Project DEF, and 2 quick wins which we have achieved as a result of this initiative and key takeaways from my presentation. So detection engineering and threat hunting are basically 2 sides of the same coin, where the objective of both disciplines is to hunt for evil. And by hunting for evil, what it means is to reduce the breach detection gap in order to minimize impact of a potential breach to your organization. There's no distinction of whether detection engineering or threat hunting is better, but rather both discipline complements one another. So for example, if there is any findings from a detection engineering, you can use it to pivot for a threat hunt, whereas findings from a threat hunt ultimately will feed back into detection engineering to improve upon your existing detection rules. So detection engineering takes a reactive approach and looks mainly at IOCs or indicators of compromise. And we can relate it to the pyramid of pain, which was covered earlier by John. And what it means is really indicators at the bottom of the pyramid, such as hashes, domains, IPs, can be easily changed by adversaries, which cause little pain to them. But threat hunting takes a different approach, a more proactive approach by scaling up the pyramid and looks at TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures, which can be difficult to change for the adversary and thereby causing more pain to them. So going back more than a decade, the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the pyramid of pain came to existence. So although they are not considered threat hunting frameworks, they actually paved the way for development of the first threat hunting framework by Squirrel. And this framework follows a hypothesis-driven process, and it also discusses about the hunting maturity model, which describes 5 different levels of hunting capabilities and how you can mature them within your organization. 3 years later, the Dutch Payments Association came out with the 30 framework, which improves upon the Squirrel framework and also adds 2 new types of hunt, the unstructured and data-driven hunt. PIC is the latest and greatest threat hunting framework, which is created by David Bianco, who also created the Squirrel framework back in 2015. So this framework improves upon all existing hunting frameworks and adds a new type of hunt by using machine learning technique. I'll not dive into details of the hunt here, but you can check out the link below if you are interested to learn more. So I've added a slide here to explain briefly what the MITRE ATT&CK framework is. So you can think of it as an encyclopedia of tactics, techniques, sub-techniques, and procedures which are being used by adversaries. So the tactics are why the adversary is performing an action, and it's represented in rows such as initial access, execution, persistence. And techniques are represented in columns, which are why the adversary is performing that action, and sub-techniques are more specific description of the adversary. Procedures are in the wild use of these techniques or sub-techniques by these adversaries. And an example is, for example, a certain threat group is trying to maintain persistence in the target network. And in order to do so, they will install run keys in the registry or startup folder. As the attack framework is very comprehensive and there are more than 200 techniques and sub-techniques, so it's important to note that context is key here. So it's not practical to have full coverage across a certain tactics or its techniques. So you have to look at your organization's threat landscape and consider the techniques which are of interest to your organization. So 2 years ago, we launched a threat hunt initiative internally known as Detection Engineering and Proactive Threat Hunting. So we decided to name our initiative as such by taking reference from the concept of defense in depth or layered security, because the objective of our initiative is to improve upon our current security controls. So this initiative is led by a senior defer analyst and conducted on a fortnightly basis, where the objective, where a handful of senior analysts will gather and share hunting ideas together. So until today, we still don't have a formalized threat hunting, but we are seeing success to a certain degree when we incorporate the right people, process, and technology. So we started off with just senior analysts on the team, and we have now expanded this initiative to the whole of our blue team, such as our SOC team, our CTI team, our defer team, and also our vulnerability management team, where analysts, regardless of their roles or experience, are invited to participate and contribute threat hunting ideas. We took reference from the various alluded threat hunting frameworks and came up with our own straightforward and iterative process, where in the first phase, an analyst will research and submit a hunt idea from various resources. So for example, if a CTI analyst is reviewing a threat report and came across a new technique, they will submit the hunt idea. Or if an IR analyst is working on an investigation and came across something new, they can submit their hunt idea. And in phase 2, all members of the initiative will come together to discuss, review, and come to a consensus of whether to accept or reject the hunt submission. In the event that it's being accepted, there will be a JIRA task created automatically. And if it's being rejected, there will be a justification provided as to why it's being rejected. For example, it might already be covered by our existing security tools or our EDR tools, or it's being classified as a detection engineering. In the last phase, everyone will come together in the next fortnightly sprint and provide updates on the use cases which they're working on and surface any issues or roadblocks which they might have encountered, and other members will provide feedback for improvement. On the technology piece, we decided to adopt the MITRE ATT&CK framework, firstly because it's free and available to use for any organizations, regardless of size or industry. And it's also being referenced by the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, including multiple cybersecurity vendors, and also the intelligence community. But most importantly, it's also used by our red team and serves as a common language between us and our red team. So we wanted to track our progress thus far to measure the efficiency of our initiative and how we can improve upon it, and whether it's enough of a justification to our senior management team to create a formal threat hunting. So within these 2 years, we created close to 30 threat hunting use cases, which comes down to an average about 1 to 2 use cases a month, which is a pretty decent progress. And on top of that, we also managed to have a detection coverage across 20 attack techniques and sub-techniques. We also identify other issues like insufficient logging in our Windows event logs, and also found out about some outdated or end-of-life systems that we have patched. Next, I'll be sharing 2 quick wins which we have achieved from this initiative and how we used it to detect some of the low-hanging fruits. Remote monitoring and management tools, otherwise known as remote access tools. So remember the SolarWinds incident back in 2020, where the Fancy Bear threat group attributed to Russian state-sponsored group planted a malicious code injection into the Orion IT monitoring and management system. So since then, there was a rise in popularity amongst threat actors like initial access brokers, ransomware groups, and even state-sponsored groups, by using remote access tools to live off the land because they have a site file certificate, as well as some exclusion passed by antivirus or EDR tools. They're also able to bypass admin privilege requirements and some software management control policies. These tools are being used as a command and control mechanism to maintain persistence on the victim's network and also to perform lateral movement across the environment. So the last I checked, there are more than 100 remote access tools and counting. So how can we hunt for such tools? In the ideal scenario, we can look at mitigation by applying application controls. which will restrict the downloads or installations of such tools, but oftentimes these are being used by your IT team or your network team or your end user team. So the next best option we can take is to implement multi-factor authentication on the usage of these tools. However, we found it worth to implement detections nonetheless, regardless of whether these tools are approved or unapproved, just because they're able to live off the land. So looking at the network-based detection, we can monitor for ports or domains which are used by these tools. And on the host layer, we can look at processes which are being spawned by these remote tools or any file certificates which are associated with them. So we have also maintained a repository of remote access tools in the Excel spreadsheet here because everyone loves Excel spreadsheets. So yeah, so we decided to use Excel to track our hunt progress as well as to be used by our CTI team to look at these tools which are associated with any threat groups. The next use case I'll be talking about is how you can generate the top 5 attack techniques which are relevant to your organization. So firstly, you should look at your organization's risk appetite and consider the priority intelligence requirement from your CTI team. And looking at the threat groups, their capability, their intent, and their opportunity. So for example, if you're looking at the top threat actors by countries such as China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, or you can look at the top cybercrime or ransomware groups. And in step 2, you can use Attack Navigator to apply different layers of the threat actors TTPs together and finally extract the top 5 techniques which overlap and then implement detections in your system. So here I've included a screenshot on the social engineering threat group on Scattered Spider, which rose to notoriety last year in September after breaching the MGM resorts. So the techniques in blue are those used by Scattered Spider and those in red are used by a campaign attributed to them. For a quick win, we'll ignore any attribution and just consider all the techniques which are used by this threat group. Here I've added another 2 threat actors of interest. So TA505 is also known as the clock ransomware group, which has been covered earlier by Nick extensively on the group which exploited the Movik vulnerability. And APT29, also known as Midnight Blizzard, which is the Russian threat group which targeted Microsoft email corporate systems this year. So in the last tab, it will consolidate all the techniques used by the 3 threat groups together, and you can see, and we can export it as an image file. So here in the legend, there is a scoring of 1 to 3, where 3 represents the techniques which overlaps across the earlier mentioned 3 threat groups. Then we can also export the Navigator layer as a JSON file, run it through PowerShell, and extract the techniques which have a score of 3. So of interest here is the ingress tool transfer technique. And when we complement it with other projects from the Center of Threat Informed Defense that looks at the top techniques. So the first one listed here is Sightings Ecosystem. So they have a top 15 techniques list, which also listed the ingress tool transfer as a technique. So this is an indication that you can focus your detection efforts on this technique. So if you're looking at ransomware techniques which are used by ransomware groups, you can look at the top attack techniques. Lastly, you can implement these detections in your environment and improve or maintain these detections. So again, this is just a quick win and not to duplicate any efforts from existing projects. So once you have achieved the top 5 techniques which are relevant to your organization, you can go on to look at the next 5 or the next 10 techniques which will be relevant to your organization. So to sum up my presentation, you can leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework to achieve quick wins like the 2 I've shared earlier. And organizations that do not have a threat hunt program can start today by leveraging upon your existing resources, coming up with your own customized process, and to consider using the ATT&CK framework as part of your technology or your tool. Organizations that already have a threat hunt program can still use ATT&CK to improve your detection coverage and also to mature your hunting capabilities. So it's important to automate where possible because threat hunting is an iterative process. So we don't want to do all the manual work. And lastly, if you have a red team, it's important to incorporate the findings from the blue team together with your red team so that you can identify any detection gaps and to be aware of your organization's overall security posture. I hope everyone has some takeaways from my presentation, and thank you for listening.